G'day, Michael here. This video is about the problems you can have with buying handles and really what the sorts of traps you can fall into. Now I've got a fair spread of different styles of handles here. Got various, well, they're called D handles and C handles, bow handles, all sorts of different names, but basically they consist of some kind of handle with pretty much two screw holes. Now surprisingly, there are three handles that are the same for the context of this video, and three that are completely different to each other for the same reason. Now, at first glance you'd say, well, these three are the same, right? Well, actually, they're the ones that are completely dissimilar to each other. The ones on the left here, quite a difference in size, but they are, in fact, the same for the context of what I'm saying. If you were to buy a handle like this, which you can get from like a hardware store, and they may look like this, so it's not about appearances, we are talking about the hole characteristics. These holes get you into trouble, these holes keep you out of trouble. Now I'll explain why. There's been a well-established standard, probably I imagine it was in the 1970s, I got to know about it in the 1980s, a system called System 32. It may have even come about in the 1960s for all I know. But it's basically because of multi-boring machines for woodworking. They have a spacing of 32 millimeters between spindles. Right, now these handles are all an increment of 32 in their spacing. Let's just try that guy. You can see that is 3 spaces, or 96 millimeters, 4 spaces, 128. Oh, doesn't quite go on the span of holes that I have here, but that's basically 8 spaces, but it's a multiple of 32. And what this means is all the handles that are made to this standard, you'll be able to buy similar handles or quite different looking handles that use those spaces. So if you maybe want to modify something at a later date or change the handles out, you'll be able to get different handles for that job. If you expand out, let's say you have your kitchen installed and then 3 years later or 10 years later you want to add an extra cupboard and you can't buy the same handles anymore, you'll be able to change all the handles out for a handle that will fit your hole centerings because they're based on that 32 millimeter spacings. So it's quite an important detail. These are kind of future-proofed by the fact that they're so compatible to many other handles. Right, now at the opposite end of the scale, even though it's got 2 holes, you've got these handles. These have been made to their own arbitrary sizes. There is no consistency across the handles, even though they look the same, for the hole centerings. So they are a trap. You know, there's just no way you can reconcile 2 holes in a door and change out the handles. And it could just be that these are actually sold by the same supplier, but just maybe 10 years apart or something like that, or a different batch or a different shipping container load or whatever it is they get them in. But they are just arbitrary sizes, they're pointless, and they can get you into a lot of trouble. So buying handles like this, where they are not increments of 32, is basically a disaster for you. You can probably buy this standard of handle, this style of handle, to match these spacings, and I think this one actually does. So that's actually made a bit of a liar out of me, but those two are compatible. They are 96 millimeter spaces. But the other two are some just random measurements. So we've actually got 4 handles that are the same. Those 4 are the same. These 2 are completely odd, so I was actually corrected in that. Alright, so let's go have a look at the other handles. These handles all require quite some expertise in installing. I guess the simplest one is probably this one, which looks fairly complex, but it's actually simply 2 holes. Now again, compatibility for a later date, none of these handles actually have that unless you're able to get the exact same handle again. These have been on the market for decades, so I guess they'll be available for decades to come just because they're a good basic handle that do the job. They're a sliding door flush pull, so they're designed to just give you a bit of purchase to open and shut a sliding door without really catching your fingers or anything like that. So they're kind of finger friendly. Okay, now this one here which I mentioned, which is like a hanging pull, so it comes out as a handle when you grab it. It's a little bit like a military style handle. But in any case, you've got those two holes. Now those two holes, they're about 76 millimeters apart, which is probably more accurately 3 inches. Now you have to relieve that first shoulder there, where the threads are mounted, which is probably about a 6 or 7 mil diameter. And the internal screw holes probably 4 millimeters. Or they might be near equivalent of imperial measurements. So that would be something to watch out for too. You might actually have to get special imperial screws. In the US, probably imperial is normal, but everywhere else in the world, metric is normal. So this is not compatible to the other threads like they are. These may or may not be imperial threads, don't know. But you've got to keep track of all the different screw types if you buy any of these sorts of random things from the hardware store. Okay, so I've talked about this recess, but if you look at it, it is a little bit tricky. It's not something you'd set up a router for. It's actually something you'd probably need a good carpenter or cabinet maker, someone that knows their way around hand tools to knock them in. Probably wouldn't take a trained person very long. Doesn't take me long anyway. But you have to be a little bit careful because there's not that much cover on the outside edge of that cutout. And that seems to be a common problem with any of these recess things. You can see here the screw holes are very close on the back of this one to the recess. So your recess has to be pretty accurate so your screws have got something to screw into. If you cut away that timber too much, then you've got nothing for the screws to hold on to. Okay, this one's a little bit better for these screw mountings, and it's a circular hole so you can easily make a template up. And it's also got a, well, you can see the square socket there, which is designed to run a latch spindle. They call it, you know, a little square shaft in the centre of a latch or a lock, a spindle. I don't know what they call it, a spindle, because it's actually sort of square and it only rotates a bit. But anyhow, it's got the ability to do that. Or you can simply use this handle as like a, well, a typical, well, military style handle, hanging pull, whatever you want to call it. Right, then you have a handle like this one. Now this is quite precisely made, consistent, but you can see there's not much of a margin around the outside edge. So again, you need to be pretty accurate with your work. So you need some, you know, expertise, good template, maybe a CNC machine or whatever. And it also, because it mounts to like a corner edge of a door or a drawer front, you've got the thickness of the material, which is about 2 millimeters. So if you've got 2 millimeters of door clearance and you need this handle, there's 2 millimeters of that clearance used up just by the thickness of this unit. So if you've got two doors coming together with a 2 mil clearance, the handles won't actually be able to go between the doors. So you're creating a large space between the doors. And if you're trying to let it flush into the door, then you have to be extremely good to get the outside edge of this looking neat. That would be very difficult on something like a vinyl wrap door or a laminate door. It's quite tricky to get that to be a nice finish. So this door handle looks very simple and nice and neat, but it actually, the complexity of mounting it is very, very high for such a simple looking handle. Now this one is actually what's caused me to make this video. This handle looks great and simple. It's designed as a flush pull, something you can get a bit of purchase on so you can open a drawer or open it as a door, whatever. It's kind of a nice functioning handle, but when you look at the back of it, it's a nightmare for fitting. You've got the major recess for the main socket, but then you've got this little flange around the outside edge and the radius, so that all has to be let in. But you need to have it fairly tight because in the end here, I don't know whether you can see that, there's the screw holes. There's one here, and one here. Let's get my hand out of the road. So you can see the screw hole there. So looking at it from the other side, you can see there's a screw hole in the end there, but that screw hole is a long way in. And you need to get, this is the screw supplied, you need to get that screw in there and driven in, and it sits about in that location kind of when it's installed. The trouble is you've only got this little slot to work in, which I can barely get my finger in. So you're supposed to get a drill into that space to drill that hole, to pre-drill it into the timber, because you won't be able to put much torque on this screw without busting it. So you really do have to pre-drill where this screw goes in. Alright, so let's say we can magically pre-drill in there. I don't know how. I actually can't see myself getting that happening. Yeah, it's going to be very tricky. So I haven't got a good solution for that yet. I'll probably end up gluing this in with some high-grade glue because I can't see me using this screw. But I really don't like that idea very much at all. Alright, so they've made it so this is very difficult to install to do it the way they intended. And the other thing is, being coated, you don't have any tolerance for, like, if you bump this with any tool, it's scratched. And so you basically destroy the handle just with the smallest mishap. And there's no way you can touch it up because it is a powder coated finishing texture. If you try to brush finish, it would be very odd. So it's a very difficult handle to fit. Like I said, I'll probably end up gluing this in because I can't see being very reliably able to put these in without some sort of, well, risk of losing one of these screws. That's the other thing. I want to give you the right number. There's a high risk of losing a screw, damaging a screw, breaking a screw. And if you're going to try and pre-drill, there's a high risk of actually scratching this with a drill chuck or something like that. So it's possible to install, but very difficult. So it's really important when you're buying a handle to think about what actually happens when it's installed. There are a lot of traps in these simple little things. They don't look like much, but they can be quite a disaster, particularly if you want to do something yourself at home and you don't have the equipment or the skill level to deal with the issues that turn up. Yeah, you think you're buying maybe a $5 handle, it ends up costing you $100 to fit it, sort of thing. So it's, yeah, maybe, I'm hoping this saves you from a disaster. In any case, I'll get these installed. I'll be cutting out the socket with a computerized router, which I have yet to design the actual cutting path, but I'll do that when it comes. In any case, handles like this, where you've got two holes and sets of holes like spaced at increments of 32, then they are the least trouble. You can make up a template, drill a pair of holes, and if at a later date you have to change the handles out, you'll be able to buy handles that match the hole drilling. All these other handles are very specific. So if at a later date, I don't know, a handle gets damaged, or you want to expand, you want to do a renovation in your kitchen or something, add another 20 doors or drawer fronts or something, you won't be able to get something to match. And if you do, the likelihood is slim that they'll, you know, even fit the same screw holes, or even perhaps the same cutouts, because these parts, these things often vary in size. If you get 5 of these, 3 of them will be one size and 2 will be another. It's quite surprising how inaccurate these parts are made often. Yeah, well, I guess that's it. I hope I can save you from a disaster. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, ask a question, leave a comment. Bye for now.